Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. In this video, an entitled HOA Karen comes to my private porch and then tries to start a fight cause I refuse to join her stupid HOA. Let's dive right into the video. The title story starts like this. So I like the neighborhood I live in and I've always liked it aside from one detail. The detail being the HOA. I don't know if it is their attitude where they think they are better than other people because they are in one, or the long list of rules. Either case, the idea of an HOA makes me sick and gives me a certain image of a person in my head. A Karen, but not just any generic Karen. This Karen is the one in charge of my HOA, and I swear she must have taken a class or read some book on how to be one because she has it down to a science. The hair, the too much jewelry, and of course way too much bragging for her own good. Not only does she get to brag about being the president of the HOA, but also about her children and husband. She talks non-stop about her husband being a lawyer and spending long hours in the courthouse. As for her kids, she claims that they are both geniuses and probably gonna end up in an Ivy League school. Personally, I think that she might be inhaling too much hairspray because they seem about as dumb as every other average kid. Not to say that all kids are dumb, but hers were part of a group with one on a bike trying to jump over the others who were lying on the sidewalk. The saving grace for me is that I owned my house before the HOA was even formed and never signed up to be a part of it. So while it does exist in my neighborhood, it doesn't exist for me. The bad news is that Karen does not seem to understand that fact and tends to bother me and other non-members whenever she seems to get a chance. Most of the time, it is telling us that we should sign up and are missing out on so many benefits, a benefit apparently being allowed to attend meetings. I think her pitch might need some work, not that she would ever be able to convince me anyway. So I was just skimming around the internet one day and came across an article talking about how a natural lawn could be even better. Some versions can require less water and more plant diversity. I was liking what I was seeing and ended up down a rabbit hole of people talking about and showing a more natural kind of lawn. Similar to dumb things I see online at 3 AM, I was sold. I was planting more bushes and other low maintenance plants, including moss. The amount of grass was greatly reduced and I really enjoyed how it looked. I never thought about how bland a lawn was until I learned that we as people do have alternatives. Karen was not happy about the lawn change I made. She sent me a letter from the HOA demanding that I reverse what I did and get my lawn back to how it was before, including the guidelines the HOA had for what they considered an acceptable lawn. I really did not give two damns about what Karen thought, and I was not gonna change my lawn based on HOA rules. She knew that I was not a member and she could not force me to comply, so I just ignored the letter. I guess that being ignored must have hurt her ego or something, because she decided that instead of calling me or sending another letter, she would just show up on my porch. Just for some reference, after my sidewalk, there are 2 steps up to my porch. I barely got the door open before Karen already started screaming at me. Karen, how dare you think that you can just ignore my letter? Me, can you lower your voice please? No, because clearly I need to speak loudly if I want to actually get something through your head. Me, you can leave my property right now if you just want to scream and insult me. Karen, you need to fix your lawn. It looks horrible and like the entire land is dilapidated. Nobody wants to look at it. Me, I like looking at it, and since it is my lawn, then I'm the only one that matters. Karen, the HOA is very clear about lawn maintenance. I don't have to do a damn thing you say. I'm not part of the HOA. And furthermore, I'm not going to continue to stand here and have you scream at me on my own yard. Leave or I swear I will call the police and have you removed. Karen must not be used to being on the end of a conversation where the other person is the one wanting to call the police, and with her yelling, the only thing she did was give herself a bit of an audience. People walking their dogs or just outside for other reasons seem to be totally entranced by Karen screaming. Instead of backing down or at the very least actually leaving, she decided that it would be smart to square up against me right on my porch. She knew people were watching too. I think she was just so deluded that she believed those people would be on her side too. Well, I guess something that she did not know about me was that I did some taekwondo in my time. I don't look like it as a 5'3" very skinny woman. I swear that I didn't want to fight back against Karen, but well, once she swung her fist and entire arm at me, I just went on some kind of instinct. My elbow shot out as I dodged getting hit by her. I sadly think I will always vividly remember making contact and watching her stumble backwards down the steps and lying unconscious on my walkway. I stood there not exactly sure what I was meant to do, but after thinking for about half a minute I realized that she could be seriously hurt and called the police. I did not mean to knock her out with my elbow, but I guess I did. I told them on the phone exactly what happened, knowing that once they arrived I was gonna look very suspicious. They arrived and I gave them my story of her yelling at me about the yard and then attacking me when I demanded she left. Usually I hate and internally squirm at unwanted attention, so the people that watched the entire thing I had wished were not there when it all went down. At this point I was beyond thankful for them actually, because they were also telling the police what they saw happened. And their stories all matched up with mine of Karen starting the fight, and I was just trying to stop myself from getting punched in the face. They did not seem to want to just let it go until they could speak to Karen at the hospital. She did not suffer any injuries aside from a bump on the head and a twisted ankle from going down. Her story to the police, of course, had me starting the fight and her just wanting to be left alone. Which honestly made no sense since she approached me. Police told me that her story made no sense to them, and with the other witnesses they were arresting Karen for assault and not me. Of course Karen blamed me, and more importantly the entire neighborhood heard what happened. When they found out it was all because of my lawn, I started getting questions about why I changed it so drastically. Some of the other non-HOA members were now considering making the change as well or doing other things since they were also so bored of the generic suburban lawn. The one thing that I was expecting was a letter from Karen's husband, the lawyer, suing me for something, medical bills or emotional damage or trauma or just anything. It was making me a bit nervous, and I was talking to my neighbor about it when he just started laughing. I was confused until he was able to compose himself enough to tell me, so Karen lied about her husband being a lawyer. He did work long hours at the courthouse because he was the janitor there. Now I'm not giving any shame to janitors, they work hard and deserve respect, but I will say that it really broke this image Karen wanted to make for herself. I made sure that word spread about the whole thing, and she was seen as even more of a liar from now on. Now, the HOA was not happy about Karen getting arrested for assault. That could easily ruin their image, and that was something that none of them wanted. Most of the people on the board were mini Karens, not quite as bad as her, but just annoying people overall. They would enforce the crappy rules, but only to the actual members. In their quest of damage control, they actually kicked Karen out of her position as president. They booted her from the entire board, so she was just now a lowly homeowner like everybody else. And for a Karen like her, losing status was worse than if she had lost her house or life savings. I got a letter from the HOA again, but this time it was an apology because of what Karen did. They also made sure to claim that she acted alone to cover their own rear, but I was promised to be left alone by the HOA from that point forward, which was nice. Karen did not go to jail for swinging at me, but was forced to attend anger management classes. A fact that everybody quickly learned about and made comments to her about. Sometimes I think that maybe this was the best kind of bad karma that Karen could have gotten. Sure, she could have been fined, or if it was a more serious case of assault, done some time in jail, but I think this was worse for her. She had to now walk down the street every single day knowing that everybody knows what she did and why she is not the HOA president anymore. To see my house and lawn and have it be a reminder that she had tried to bite off more than she could chew and failed. I don't want to sound sadistic and say that I'm thrilled people are now whispering about her in the stores and other places. But I will say that was what she spent her entire life doing to others, so maybe it is not bad to enjoy it a little bit. As for my lawn, it is still in that natural state, and I noticed 2 other homes doing the same thing. I hope it becomes more commonplace, because for me, it makes the neighborhood more unique and beautiful. That should be something an HOA wants instead of disencourages. And wait, before you click off the video, the next one is an incredible HOA story titled, "Am I the jerk for deliberately antagonizing my neighbor and their HOA when they have no power over me?" And by the way, please don't forget to like the video if you've enjoyed the HOA story so far. So, my wife and I live in one of those infamous HOA neighborhoods, except here's the kicker, our house is not subject to HOA rules. Neither is the house next door to us. When this subdivision was built 20 years ago, our 2 properties were already there and the developer had to build around us. The previous owners of both homes refused to join the HOA, and when we bought our place 5 years ago, we happily maintained that status. At first, everything was fine. We kept our property neat enough that nobody bothered us, and then about a year ago, the family across the street moved in. From day one, they've been the stereotypical, "let me speak to your manager" types who seem to think they had been appointed as the neighborhood's self-important rule enforcers. The tension started over our family SUV. It is an old 2000 Expedition that my wife and I bought when our family started growing. We got 5 teenagers, God help us, and we needed something big enough to haul everyone around. It is not pretty, the paint is fading in spots, and there's a small dent in the back bumper, and it makes an occasional concerning noise, but it runs just fine and it is paid off. Most importantly, it serves its purpose. We usually park it on the street in front of our house because our driveway is often full with our other car and our older kids' vehicles too. About 3 months ago, I was mowing the lawn when the husband from across the street came marching over with a sheet of paper in his hand. "Excuse me," he said, not even bothering with a greeting. "I wanted to make you aware that you're in violation of HOA regulations." I turned off the mower. "What?" He thrust the paper at me. "Section 8, paragraph 4. No vehicle may be parked on the street for more than 2 hours at a time. Your truck has been there for days." I wiped sweat from my forehead and took a deep breath. "We are not part of the HOA." His face twitched. "Everyone in this subdivision is part of the HOA." "Actually, no. Our house and the next door one were here before the subdivision. We are grandfathered out." He stared at me as if I'd just spoken in tongues. "That is impossible. I'm on the board and I've never heard of such an arrangement." "Well, it is true. You can check with the county if you want," I said, turning the mower back on. "Have a good day." I thought it would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next week I found a notice taped to our SUV warning that it would be towed in 48 hours if not moved. I tore it off, crumpled it up and threw it away. 2 days later another notice appeared, and this time with "final warning" stamped across it in angry red letters. When my wife got home from work I showed her the notice. "Can they actually do that?" she asked, concerned. "Not legally, no, but I'm getting tired of this harassment." I decided to pay a visit to the HOA president, who thankfully was not my across the street neighbor, but a reasonable seeming older woman who lived a few blocks over. "I understand your frustration," she said after I explained the situation, "but your vehicle is an eyesore and several members have complained that it brings down property values." "I get that," I replied, "but again, we are not part of the HOA. You got no jurisdiction over our property." She sighed. "Perhaps as a gesture of goodwill, you should consider parking it in your garage or driveway." "Well, our garage is full, and with 3 teenage drivers in the house, so is our driveway most days. I'm not inconveniencing my family to appease people who have no authority over us." The woman pressed her lips together tightly and said, "I will remind the board of your unique situation." But the harassment did not stop. Every few days a new notice would appear on our SUV, and then we started getting letters in the mail about other violations, aka our grass being half an inch too long, a basketball hoop that our kids had set up, my wife's garden that apparently didn't use approved plants. The real crisis came though when my wife and I went on a long weekend trip to celebrate our anniversary. Our youngest was at a school camp and the other kids were staying with various friends. I had asked my sister to stop by and feed our cat, but otherwise the house was empty. On the second day of our trip, I got a panic call from my sister. "There's a tow truck outside your house trying to take your SUV!" She practically shouted into the phone. And by the way, guys, my apologies about the kids screaming in the background. It seems like today the kids in the neighborhood are totally out of control, and as usual the parents don't care. But anyway, what? They cannot do that! I felt my blood pressure spiking. The driver says he has authorization from the HOA, something about an abandoned vehicle ordinance. "Tell him to stop immediately or I'm calling the police for theft," I said, already pulling up the non-emergency line for our local police department on my laptop. By some miracle, my sister was able to convince the tow truck driver to wait while she called me, and I called the police. An officer came out and after checking the property records, informed the driver that the HOA had no authority to tow vehicles from our property or the public street in front of it. When we got back from our trip, I was fuming. I marched across the street and rang the doorbell. The wife answered, her husband lurking behind her. "Did you call a tow truck to take our SUV while we were on vacation?" I demanded. "That vehicle has been sitting there for days," the husband said, stepping forward. "It is clearly abandoned." "It is parked in front of our house," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It is an eyesore," the wife chimed in. "The HOA rules clearly state—" "We are not part of your HOA," I interrupted, my patience completely gone now. "How many times do we have to go through this? You have no authority over us or our property." The husband crossed his arms. "We will see about that. The city has ordinances about junk vehicles too. They slammed the door in my face. The next day, I got a call from the city councilman. Apparently, my neighbors had filed a complaint. I explained the situation, and fortunately, the councilman was understanding. He confirmed that our SUV did not qualify as a junk vehicle under city ordinances and suggested I document any further harassment. Well, that is when I decided to fight fire with fire. If they wanted to play hardball, I could play that too. First, I made sure our SUV was parked legally on the street in front of our house. Then my wife and I put up a "Vote for Beto" sign in our front yard. We are not even particularly political, but we knew that political signs were forbidden by the HOA, and our across-the-street neighbors had a cruise sticker on their car. The sign seemed to drive them absolutely crazy. Every time they walked or drove past our house, they would glare at it like it had personally insulted their mother. Then we painted our front door a bright, cheerful yellow. Not outlandish, but definitely not the approved earth tones mandated by the HOA. The final straw was when we installed solar-powered garden lights along our walkway, multi-colored ones that slowly changed from blue to green to red throughout the night. They were tasteful in my opinion, energy efficient, and completely violated the HOA's lighting restrictions. The letters kept coming, each more threatening than the last. I kept a file of all of them, along with documentation of the towing incident and records proving that we were not subject to HOA rules. Last week though, things escalated again. The across-the-street neighbors apparently convinced the HOA to send us a formal letter from their attorney threatening legal action. I contacted our own lawyer, who almost laughed when I explained the situation. She sent a cease and desist letter to both the HOA and the neighbors, clearly outlining our legal position and warning that any further harassment would result in a real lawsuit. Since then, the letters have stopped, but the death glares haven't. My wife thinks we should just make peace, maybe park the SUV in the driveway more often as a gesture of goodwill. And to be honest, part of me agrees that life would be easier if we just tried to blend in more. Another part of me feels like giving in would just embolden them to try to enforce other rules on us, plus our teenagers think it's hilarious that their parents are the neighborhood rebels, and I'm kind of enjoying the reputation too. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for deliberately antagonizing my neighbor and the HOA when they have no power over me? And yeah guys, let me know what you think in the comments about this one. Do you think OP was the a-hole here or not? I would say since OP is clearly not part of the HOA, he can do all of this without really feeling bad. But maybe you have a different opinion. Let me know. The next one is an amazing malicious compliance story. So I worked as a care staff for a private company of 250-ish employees that deals with special needs individuals, mental disabilities, and often physical ones. We have day hab facilities and group homes. In a prior job I did the same for the state, but was moved to an IT role after a while until the stupid from upper management became too great. A whole other story. Before any of that though, I was an EMT, and before that I was in the army, and I know how to cover my own ass. Backstory complete. My boss sent out an email to all staff and had an in-person company meeting because I put on a form the estate inspectors look at that said, "Client returned from day trip sunburned, disoriented, and dehydrated." Staff with the client reported they passed out. Apparent heat exhaustion. Reported to RN and state authority for possible neglect. So apparently the RN never looked at the report before the state auditors came in a week later, although she did look at the client and agreed with me about the heat exhaustion the next day when she was back in the office from a day off. Fast forward 9 days and we have an emergency company meeting. Boss hands out a paper specifically telling every staff they are not to do anything outside the scope of their job description, and they are not doctors, while staring at me the whole time. She calls me out specifically during the meeting by name. Alright, fine, I stopped doing anything but the exact wording of my original hiring duties. 2 months pass. One day I get a call about a problem with the computers at the main office in San Antonio. My job is over an hour away. I had traditionally done all the IT troubleshooting, as I was one for the first hires of the company and I had a background for it. Boss calls me on my day off and asks me to drive to the main office and fix their computer system. I said to her, "I cannot do anything outside of my listed duties, per your order." Then I hung up and turned the phone off until dinner. After I turned the phone back on, I get a call within 10 minutes from the company owner. He, who had been nothing but nice to me up until now, just bluntly asks, "When I felt like doing my job and getting things working, but especially payroll, don't I want to get paid tomorrow? Get your ass in gear, son." That may indeed have been the wrong way to start the conversation with someone who wasn't being paid extra for their IT problems. I referred to him to the email and in-person letter boss had put out, and then I pointed out how company policy had a no firearms rule, but he specifically always carried a 1911 to all company meetings and events on his right hip, calling it out by model as a Kimber 4. I then politely advised him to find a way to deal with his own problems, as the computers being bricked was not one of mine, but paying employees such as me was one of his, per state and federal law, and then hung up. Turned my phone off again until I was at work 2 days later, and in that time apparently 3 staff had quit from failing to be paid, 18 more were threatening to, and the owner had driven over to have a chat with the boss and myself. They laid out that as a senior care staff, my job role had expanded over the years as I was there 5 at that point, and I countered that the pay had not at all since I had been hired. Me doing IT work was a charity from me, not a job requirement, and I appreciated none of the disrespect I had gotten lately from either of them. I also pointed out that I knew full well that a contract IT company would cost them at least hundreds, if not thousands for a consult, and at least 200 an hour, and if I deemed to fix their problem it would take about 3 hours. The owner offered me a 50-cent raise and 3 hours overtime. I countered with a public apology in front of all staff from boss, a $3 per hour raise and an exemption from the no-carry firearm policy he was being hypocritical about. They said no, so I said, I'll be back with the clients doing my job duties and let me know when they contacted an IT company and changed their minds. Keep in mind that all the computer systems were effectively bricked at this point, so the nurses cannot do any charting, no one can bill time for casework, the state paperwork, while largely paper, cannot be sent, and well, it took them 4 days, who knows how many calls to computer specialists for quotes, and another 8 quitting employees to agree to my conditions. After 4 tries to get me to let go of the concealed carry one, that was their sticking point. And by the way, I don't carry a gun at work and never have, even though in my state it's totally legal, but it bugged me the absolute hypocrisy of the owner, so I would have given up the race before that. In the end, it turns out that the owner's wife deleted something she shouldn't have had access to, and it took all of 8 minutes to restore them from backups I personally had on an old hard drive I was not using that the company said were an unnecessary cost. And the next one is titled Customer Threw a Lobster at Me, and this one is from r/Tales from Retail. So I used to work retail at a mom and pop costume store. It was the Saturday before Halloween and I was working the register closest to the door, which meant that I was handling returns and exchanges. Like most costume stores, all sales were final at our store. That being said though, we did try our best to accommodate customers and would exchange sizes or issue refunds for customers with manufacturer defects. We would also do repairs on items that were just crappily made. About 30 minutes into the shift, while I'm still fresh luckily, this woman came in for a return and is told by the greeter that I can help her with it. She walks up to my register, completely ignoring the fact that I'm in the middle of checking someone else out, and starts to tell me that she needs to do a return. I stop her and tell her that I heard her conversation with the greeter, but she will have to wait until I am done with my current transaction. She rolled her eyes at me, but then stepped aside. Once I was done, she hands me a dog lobster costume and tells me that she needs to return it. I ask if she has the receipt and why she is returning it. She says she does not have the receipt and that it was too small for her dog. And by the way, I want that costume for Disney, not gonna lie. Anyway, I explained to her that all sales are final, but if she wants to exchange the size, we can try. She starts to try and argue, but I stop her and tell her before we can do anything, I need to look up her receipt. The best way to go about that is scan the item and look up the sales history. When I go to do that, nothing came up. I then try a keyword search, nothing though. Check the item list for the manufacturer, nope. I ask the woman if she is sure she got it at our store because as far as I can tell, we don't even sell it. She then starts shrieking and cursing that of course she is sure. I ask her if she's got her credit card app on her phone and can show me the transaction on her end that might help me find it. She continues to shriek at me and refuses. She then points to a generic price sticker on the front and tells me that that is our store's price sticker. I pick up another item and show her what our store's price sticker actually looks like. At this point, she is literally turning red and cussing up a storm. She demands to see a manager, however, our owner was standing at the register next to me the whole time. He says that he's been listening in and that there's nothing else we can do for her unless we can track down some record of the purchase. She then shrieks and cusses even more and goes to storm out of the store, but right as she reaches the door, she turns around and lobs the costume at me. I duck sideways and it misses. I call after her to have a good day. The owner asks me if I'm okay, to which I shrugged and said sure. I picked up the costume, tossed it in our lost and found, and then continued on with my day. The next customer I checked out complimented me on my reflexes. At the end of Halloween we would always have a little party and our owner would get us a cake. That year one of my co-workers, who was also an artist, drew a cartoon of Lobster Lady to put on the cake so that we could all devour her. A few weeks after Halloween, when we were going through the lost and found, I picked up the costume and asked our owner what I should do with it, since no one had ever returned for it. He shrugged and told me to keep it because I had earned it. Before we end the video, we will read a story from r/petty revenge that you don't want to miss. It is titled, "Play the entitled victim card yet again? Well, say goodbye to the Instagram fodder you care so much about. Once upon a time, I had a bachelorette trip with 4 friends I met after moving to a new city, plus an old friend of mine from my home state, who was my maid of honor at the time. We will call her Ren. Now, Ren dealt with anxiety and depression, which made me excuse a lot of her bad behavior as a friend. If something positive was going on in my life, it must be nice. If I was dealing with something, she just had it 10 times worse, despite her having few responsibilities, no job, kids, etc., and living in a giant house with her saint of a boyfriend, who served as her personal assistant. In hindsight, most of my conversations with Ren revolved around the 1001 ways she had been betrayed or abandoned by people in her life and not knowing better yet. I bought into her version of events, giving her the pity and validation that she needed over the years. Anyway, fast forward to my bachelorette trip. This was the first time in our friendship that I was in the spotlight for once, and it turned out that Ren absolutely could not handle that. She spent the entire time trying to change the topic of conversation to be about herself, did not lift a finger to help with anything. I planned and booked the entire trip myself, by the way, and kept trying to milk more appreciation over the goodie bags she made and the decorations she brought but never actually put up. To make an already long story actually short, Ren ended up leaving early and sent me a long message that included all of the ways I'd betrayed her, which included not going out of my way to sit next to her at meals and not buying my wedding dress with her even though I went dress shopping with her first, just the 2 of us. She ended this insanely petty list of grievances by dropping out of my wedding and asking to exchange photos from the trip before we part ways. But the thing is, I took probably 3 times as many photos of Ren as she did of me, despite me being the bride/guest of honor. The thought that she was still just trying to use me for social media fodder before adding me to her long list of betrayers was the straw in the camel's back for me. I also knew Ren used social media as a crutch to give herself a certain outward appearance, and these pictures would have been like validation-seeking gold. So what did I do? I deleted or edited every photo with Ren in it, and I never responded, giving her no fuel for the dramatic blowout she was probably hoping for. I also became even closer with my other friends on the trip, who still find every reason to celebrate me and lift me up rather than put me down. Ren later left me a non-apology in the hopes of rekindling our friendship. I never responded to that either. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my playlist on the left, otherwise I will see you again tomorrow.